The CGA Tour, a podcast unlike any other. Now your host, Calvin Alexander.
Welcome back to yet another episode of the CGA Tour podcast. As always here, I'm your host, Calvin Glenn Alexander, the Oklahoma State representative for the College Huddle and the College Huddle Network. And tonight I'm joined by the K-State representative of the College Huddle, but Cocaine Willie. So I've got, of course, Matt, Bob, and Chef. Am I allowed to say Fireball Matt yet? I don't know. I'm throwing it to you guys to try you guys self out as well too here.
You can always say Fireball Matt.
There we go.
I call him Fireball. That's my boy.
That's exactly how he says it too.
Well, where can everyone listen to you guys, follow you out, and tell me a little about, your guys' podcast too? How long have you guys been K-State fans?
Well, we've been K-State fans for a very long time. I've been a K-State fan since I was 6 or 7 years old. My mom went to K-State. My grandma grew up with a guy who played on one of our Final Four teams in basketball in the 50s, and I've got 6 generations in Kansas. So I've always been a K-State guy. And you can find us at Cocaine Willie.
Yeah, Cocaine Willie on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram. Find us all that. Follow us. We talk back, talk to us. We'll always hit you back up if you send us a quick message or whatever. Me personally, grew up Fort Riley, kind of just indoctrinated into Kansas State culture there. Huge Kansas State following there. My mom used to work games all the time, and serving meals or whatever, popcorn, all the good stuff. So I grew up a Kansas State fan, probably, just like Bob, 6 or 7 years old, 8 years old, really got into it around 8. That's when I really started caring about football.
That was when K-State started getting good, when he was 8 years old. He wasn't following.
It was 98. It was 98.
Yeah.
It's about the same timeline as you becoming a Chiefs fan, Matt.
Wow. Good point. I'm a fourth generation K-Stater. I grew up in New York, but always grew up a K-State fan, went to K-State, love K-State, heart them so much. So glad to be on the show.
Sounds like it's the same all around, just kind of born into it, which is awesome. Well, I was just on your guys' podcast, so if you don't get a chance, don't do it right now, but do it after the end of this podcast, of course. But hit the link in the description here. Go check out the episode I was just on with you guys, because basically dished out every single Oklahoma State fan's worst nightmare of what could happen on Saturday, and hopefully doesn't happen. But with that being said, want to ask you guys here kind of a couple questions here, but one, after both of our disappointing losses this past weekend to two schools that are both in the Big 12, but play in the state of Utah, or at least that's where they call home for now. Who do you guys think is the best team in the Big 12 right now? Do you think it's Utah, BYU? I don't know. Go off the board, maybe?
I think you have to put Utah in there. I mean, with the performance that they showed at in Stillwater with a backup quarterback, Cam Rising, as much as grief as we want to give him for being a glass boy, he is really good at throwing the football around. So I think their potential kind of, is through the roof when he's actually healthy and they're playing. And I would imagine that sometime this season he will be back. So I think it has to be Utah, but a dark horse for a team that's really, really good is UCF. So I got UCF up there pretty high when we first did our rankings and who we thought was going to be in the Big 12 championship. I had UCF right there.
Yeah, I mean, whenever I see an SEC team let their quarterback transfer out to a Big 12 team, I don't think they're going to get better that Big 12 team necessarily.
A lot of people aren't talking about Iowa State. I mean, they are a team that did, they went on the road to Iowa and, beat them. They have a strong offensive unit, good defense. They're going to have some big games, obviously, coming up. I think they're playing Houston this week, so maybe not this one. But, they're 18th in the country. They're a team I think a lot of people aren't talking about in the grand scheme of things in the Big 12. That could easily, with their schedule, make it to the championship game.
Well, Cal, I see that you've got UCF as second in the power rankings for the Big 12 Huddle this week. I've got BYU at second because that was just, that came out of nowhere. Power rankings based on the most recent performance. So I'm not the only one that has BYU on this list either. I've got Iowa State as a sneaky third, but Utah's kind of unanimous number one right now when I look across the league and what everybody else has submitted. I just think it's hard to go against them, and especially when you've got Zach Wilson's little brother coming in for Utah in Cam Rising's stead, and he's looking pretty good. I'll hand it to him. He's looking pretty good.
Is he a Cougar fan too?
I don't know.
You're allowed to be.
I think that rivalry does not cross at all. I do not think you can be a fan of both teams ever. I think you're like sworn to leave the state if you even try. It's like if you try to be an Oklahoma State and OU fan or a K-State and KU fan. You know, I mean, it just isn't allowed. You know.
Well, I meant more in the type of women he liked, just like his older brother. But you know, whatever.
His mom
Either way,
best friends going around that we don't know about.
If he gets in the league, then maybe we'll figure out then, because we didn't know about Zach Wilson until he was in the league, right? With that being said, what happened against BYU? I mean, I got to say, I was really hoping to watch the game, and as an Oklahoma State fan who just saw my team just play horrifically, I was kind of happy that you guys didn't look really dominant when we got to play you this week. So it's not like you guys playing poorly brought me a ton of joy, but it didn't make me feel that bad, at least heading into this weekend.
We were the furthest thing from dominant. It was honestly pathetic. This is the first time I've talked about it. I've blanked that game from my memory until just now. I appreciate you bringing it back. But you know, at the beginning, you know, Chris Kleiman always says field goals cannot win you games. They just won't win you games. And when you're going up on the road and your first two drives, you know, you're moving the ball and you get down to the red zone, you have to kick field goals. It wasn't a good sign from there. Defense was, you know, doing enough. We weren't creating any turnovers or anything, but it was early in the game. And then the dam broke. I don't know exactly what was going on. There was quite a few Kansas State fans in Provo, but from what I can imagine, that the place just turned into bizarro world. It was, I don't know how many points they scored in that 6-minute time frame, but it was honestly embarrassing. You know, a muff punt turns into a 93-yard return for a touchdown, and then he throws up on our grave while on the sideline. It was shocking, and I couldn't even, you know, wrap my head around what exactly happened. Maybe these two can describe it better, but it was an all-timer in terms of embarrassing K-State moments for me.
I mean, the thing with the game was it was a lot of, in the first half, missed opportunities prior to a 2-minute stretch at the end of the half that was probably the most inept I've ever seen K-State play in however many years that I've watched K-State football. You know, just mistake after mistake, and a team that just completely lost composure, you know, after a turnover that led to the touchdown, Avery trying to make a big play into, you know, an interception. It was just a really poor executed 2 minutes, which we could probably say was the overall theme on the offensive side in that first half. When you drive down the field, you get to the red zone twice and you can't get a touchdown. I think the mindset of the first half would have shifted completely if it was a 10-0 game in the second, you know, with 2 minutes to go and all that stuff happens, because you still feel like you're in the game. But it was hard. I think a lot of people, we didn't necessarily talk about BYU as a team that could put a performance like that together. That's not a knock on BYU, because at the end of the day, they took advantage of mistakes that K-State made and absolutely made K-State pay to where it was not a game. So very disappointed, of course, you know, because it's an opportunity, you know, the first kind of game of the year, the Big 12, even though it's on the road, you have an opportunity to really, you know, get a good baseline as to where you think your team is. And we're a team right now that's played 2 games on the road, and you know, the Tulane game was a dogfight until the end, and the BYU game wasn't close. So it seems like it's kind of the tale of 2 teams, one at home, one on the road. So we're happy to have this game in Manhattan this weekend.
Yeah, that's gotta be for sure. Bob, did you have any other consensus with it?
It was the weirdest game I've ever watched in my entire life, and definitely the weirdest 6 minutes of football I've ever seen in my entire life. And Matt said it best. It's missed opportunities. It was a lot of, hey, field goal. Okay, then fumble, touchdown, interception, end of the first half with the ball. Don't convert. Interception to start the second half. And that was the opportunity when you really could have taken advantage of, okay, we've got the ball to start the second half. You can make it a 17-13 game if you score here. And Avery throws an interception. I think he was just maybe rushing it. He maybe didn't go through all of his reads.
I don't know what he was looking at.
It was just it looked like a red shirt, or not even a red shirt sophomore. It looked like a sophomore mistake. It looked like kind of a rookie mistake.
You want to know what it reminded me of, and I don't want to make this too much of a K-State podcast because we're on the CGA Tour podcast right now, but that looked like 2020 Will Howard. And I don't want to put that out there, too, like just willy-nilly, but that it looked concerning. I don't know how else to put it. It was concerning. And the problem is, and you asked us this question, like what happened from the BYU game. I don't know what we could learn because we weren't, it just like Bob said, it was such a weird game. I don't really even remember K-State being out there. It just seemed like it was the crowd and BYU just scoring touchdowns in the most freakish way they possibly could. So I don't even know if we learned anything because it just wasn't a football game at that. After the second touchdown that they scored in the last 2 minutes of that first half, it wasn't a football game anymore. It was like a Broadway show for BYU fans.
I mean, I think for Oklahoma State, a good comparison would be last year's K-State game in Stillwater, if everybody remembers that game. And, it was just like this. It was a dogfight, but K-State was like the one that was about to be euthanized. I mean, it was like that bad. Like we could not do anything. Will Howard looked terrible in that game in Stillwater. So it was basically very much a carbon copy of that type of game.
Gotcha. Yeah, well, and after the game's over, the main thing that I recognized from that game is that I don't think you guys got a touchdown. So any ideas here? What happened? I know we just talked about a little bit on the podcast we just recorded here, but I mean, what prevented you guys from getting in the end zone?
I hate to say like it was the play calling, but it is just there was execution errors. Obviously, I mean that's just how football is. Like you could say the play calling, but they designed these plays to score touchdowns. So either they're not working because of execution, or it was just situationally not the right call. And I think a lot of it was that like we were getting down there, we had numbers advantage in the run game. We were running the ball pretty well until we got down to like the 15-yard line, and it would fall apart. A lot of it had to do with penalties. I cannot say like we try to give all these new schools crap for coming to the Big 12. Like they haven't seen environments like that. I haven't seen an environment like Provo at night like that. I mean, I haven't seen that, and so that one is a one-up for those new schools coming into the Big 12. If they have environments like that at night on the road every time we have to go out there, we're going to be in trouble because that was the difference maker. We couldn't get over the self-inflicted wounds caused by the BYU fan base. Shout out to them.
I do personally think it was mostly execution because shout out to the 3 Ma Pod. It's another K-State podcast. They had a former wide receiver for K-State, Curry Sexton, on the show today, and they were doing a film review session essentially with some of the key plays. And based on Curry's assessment, I mean, he knows offenses and defenses. He's had to, be part of the scheme against that, and he's had to execute on that at a high level. He was on the 2012 Big 12 championship team. I think he was the last 1,000-yard receiver along with Tyler Lockett at K-State as a wide receiver. And he's saying, I mean, play call wise, he's scheming this against a cover 2. That's what I would scheme against a cover 2. This makes sense in this situation. And going through each individual play, it kind of looked like, okay, Avery's not executing through. He's not going through his progressions. He's not maybe getting the right read on the defense and maybe figuring out which of the guys, which of the options he has to throw it to is the right option. Or to break the pocket and scramble. But there was also a situation where he broke the pocket when he did have a good pocket presence around him and then made an errant throw. And it felt more about execution. There were a couple of bad routes run by wide receivers that just didn't quite get them open enough to where Avery had an option for them. So it feels like maybe a lot of people are giving Connor Riley a bit of a premature burial here in a lot of cases. It's not to say he called a perfect game. I don't think he did. But at the same time, if you could call a perfect game and your guys aren't going to execute it perfectly or execute it 75%, maybe not even 50% in this case, you're going to lose the game.
Yeah, I mean, the last thing I'll say is, and this is something on our podcast, we haven't really necessarily talked overall about K-State ourselves as the three of us, but I mean, this is a team that is not great offensively, I would say, at this point in the season. If you look at, you take the BYU game out of the equation, when your offense is scoring 24 points against Arizona, 27 points against Tulane, we had non-offensive scores in those games that helped, obviously win the game at Tulane. The Arizona game was a little bit more, we won by 24 points, but in a game, if your offense is scoring 24, 27 points, you're going to be in a dogfight in most games. And it's probably not necessarily going to turn in your advantage if you're playing against some of the top teams in the conference, because you're putting so much pressure on your defense to make sure they don't give up that number of points. I think a lot of it has to do with you have a young quarterback who is still learning. I think the BYU game absolutely showed some of the deficiencies that Avery Johnson has in his young career that he will improve on over time. But overall, this is just a team that has a strong rushing game. But the passing game is one that improvement has to be made throughout the season if we're going to go anywhere. Because the fact of the matter is the number of points we're scoring on offense is not going to cut it playing against, Oklahoma State. And, we have Iowa State on the schedule and some of these teams that, are scoring a good number of points.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, I also want to ask you guys kind of off the Avery question here. I mean, you got a young quarterback, but from what I understand, when Will Howard left, it was like, all right, cool. Because now we've got Avery. Like, this is the guy. Do you think he's just really going through some growing pains, as kind of you're alluding to there, Matt? Or is there more to it here that maybe I'm not seeing as an Oklahoma State fan?
I mean, he's definitely going through some growing pains. I would say there's a lot of expectations that were set on Avery Johnson in the preseason. Whether those are fair or not is hard to judge, because in reality, he's the best recruit we've had at Kansas State in many, many years to come through this program. And so ultimately you're going to have high expectations because you've been given the keys to the car and you're expected to be winning the drag race all the time on the offensive side. He has elite characteristics. A lot of those, I think, come in the run game, which we're trying to limit some of that to maintain his durability through the season. One of the things that he does, need to improve on, I think, is some of the vision in the passing game. In the preseason, we heard a lot about his arm and the ability to be making some plays, but we haven't necessarily seen a ton in the, pass play over 40 yards or some of those big chunk plays that we maybe saw Will Howard do a little bit more in his time. But also Will Howard, in his 2023 season was a senior, and Avery Johnson is still a sophomore, and he has his fifth start coming up in his career coming this weekend. So there's a lot. I think the biggest thing about Avery Johnson that I like is the humility that he does have and he does show. I think he knows that he has to improve, and he's going to continue to do that. He's been, I think, a huge, leader on this team. And so a game like this is a great opportunity to show improvement. It's going to take some help around him, though, on the wide receiver perspective. And, we've gotten our tight ends involved so much, but our wide receivers have not scored a touchdown this season, which in the fifth game of the year is a huge problem.
All right. Well, I got two more questions for you guys here. Is your home field advantage just incredible? I mean, the 2 games to go off here is back-to-back Oklahoma State games, right? I mean, last year versus, you have the famous Gunnar Gundy, handshaking. Then you have, of course, us beating you last year, 29-21, and what you guys refer to as, not the greatest game ever for K-State. But then, of course, this year you've got the Arizona game, and you also have the BYU game. So is that maybe the huge difference in the outcomes here? Is just home field advantage or more to it? Just what's going on?
I think the home field advantage is definitely, a big plus when teams have to come to Manhattan. I mean, you obviously are a little shocked when you get into the stadium it's not the biggest place or anything, but they can get right up on top of you. The noise can really echo throughout that place. It being a noon game. I mean, last time we played I think it was a noon game when we beat you 48-0, but I'm not sure. But,
it was the 2:30 or 3:30.
2:30. I mean, it was a big game. So this game, will the appeal of the team maybe take a hit because of how we performed at BYU? I'm not entirely sure. I think it's sold out. So, I mean, the fanfare is going to be there. It's just, how on edge are the Kansas State fans going to be? You kind of need to get out there and, jump on Oklahoma State early to get the people really going. So, if it's a slow start, it could backfire really. It could be a church cathedral in there, be real, real quiet. So I hope that we get out to a fast start. So the K-State faithful will be there in full throat.
It's a great home field advantage, but I don't think it's infallible, if that makes sense, because that Tulane game 2 years ago was a home game. I mean, there have been home games that we've dropped that have been kind of inexplicable in the past as well. So
I don't necessarily think that has to do with the crowd, though. I mean, or like the home environment or anything like that. I think it's more. This is a big game. This is an anticipated game.
Oh.
We were anticipating both teams being 4-0 going into this game, and now both teams have taken a dump on their season somewhat, and we got to see what the crowd looks like.
Still a top 25 matchup. The Arizona game was another example of that. When it's a big matchup, the fans, the student section, everybody shows up, makes it a great time, and really does provide the team a good advantage. But all I was saying is there have been situations in the past where it does get quiet. It becomes a church cathedral, to Chef's point, where, you've got Adrian Martinez not quite doing really anything, and Tulane's taking advantage of it and then goes out and wins the game. So it has happened, and it has happened in recent memory.
All right. Well, last question I have for you guys here is, I know we're fellow fans of the true Big 8 teams, right? But, as we extend this conference invites and get out there to 16 teams now, including all 16 teams, except for our own here, I guess. Can you rank the other teams here so far in football? Who's 1, 2, and 3?
Who's 1, 2, and 3 of the Big 8?
No, just of the new Big 12. Just not. Just you can't put Oklahoma State and K-State in there. Just
All right.
Yeah.
Because if we did like an old Big 8 power ranking, that'd be kind of a fun exercise. But you go first.
Ultimately, Utah's is going to be number 1.
Consensus.
I think that was probably a consensus. I will probably at this point put Iowa State at 2.
That's not new Big 12.
Oh, we're saying new Big 12.
No,
all Big 12.
All just
all Big 12.
Not our own schools. Yeah,
all Big 12.
I mean, right? I'm going to say K-State number 1, of course, because you guys joined the podcast. Yeah. But not that much to it.
I'll probably put Iowa State at 2. Just again from a body of work perspective at this, winning on the road at Iowa. But they have a lot to prove on their side. And 3 for me would be UCF. I think UCF has looked really strong. The TCU game on the road, I think just shows some resiliency in a team early on in the season. That's only going to help them throughout. So those are my top 3.
Yeah, I would have those 3, but I would just, reverse. I would have UCF 2. I think RJ Harvey is a absolute stud. If KJ Jefferson can get it with his arm going, I think that's going to be a really dangerous offense. And their defense is chock full of 4-stars. So, I mean, it's a team that we always knew that the talent was there, that they were a sleeping giant of a program in the Big 12. It's just going to take a little bit of time. And I think they found the right mixture with Gus Malzahn leading the charge.
Yeah, and real quick, I'm going power rankings wise because I'm a big power rankings guy. I've got Utah first, BYU second, because I think they showed the most last week, even though it was kind of a weird fluky game. Iowa State's also undefeated. I mean, all of these teams are undefeated. Iowa State, I've got at third, and I've got UCF at fourth. So I just think those are right this second the teams that are riding the highest in the Big 12 right as of today, September 25th, 2024.
Well, I'm glad no one said Colorado in the top 3, because then I'm talking actual college football fans here, and not just some passerbys. But with that being said here, last thing, I know we just did score predictions on your guys' podcast, but in case anyone's like, hey, you know what, I want to know what their score predictions are before I listen to your guys' episode, what are your score predictions for this Saturday's game?
Well, I think I'm going to make some Poke fans happy, because I've got it 35-28 Oklahoma State. I do not feel great about this game. Oh, that sounds like an applause right there. Not happy about it at all. That BYU game, put a lot of doubt in my mind about this team and what we could do offensively. And, BYU is a good team, maybe, but, in the long run, I don't know. I just don't know. There could be a hangover from getting drummed like that on the road. It is, a shortened week for us as well. We didn't get back to Manhattan until 5 a.m. the next day on Sunday. So that puts a lot of stress onto this week. So if I'm proven wrong, I'm a winner. If I'm proven right, I'm a winner because I picked the game properly.
I'm going Cats 30-24. I think that Oklahoma State's going to allow a lot of big chunk plays from K-State. Oklahoma State's proven that they can stop K-State, that they can stop K-State when we get to this game, but have stopped other opponents when it gets to, red zone or within the 40 situations. But I do think K-State will know that going into this matchup, dealt with that last week against BYU, and can do what they need to do to make some corrections to prepare for that coming into this matchup against Oklahoma State. So I think you're going to get a lift from the home crowd. I think Cats 30-24, barely covering.
I'm going 28-24 K-State. I think a big thing in this game is going to be turnovers and trying to get Alan Bowman to make some mistakes. A part of that, the 28, I do think involves a non-offensive touchdown scored by the Cats. So, because let's put it this way, if our offense scores 28 points, I'd be shocked. So, but I think it's going to be a close game. It's going to be fun. Atmosphere is going to be rocking. Love this game. I love playing against Oklahoma State. I admit I mean, original Big 8 school, but it's a school that when I was in college, we were playing Oklahoma State when, Justin Blackman and, was playing there, and what's that?
Brandon Whedon.
That redhead. Yeah. Brandon Whedon. So, it's always a fun game.
Fun fact, Brandon Whedon hated by more Cleveland Browns fans than Johnny Manziel, which I didn't think he made that big of a difference there. I just didn't think it was the same type of guy. But with that being said, if you're not already, follow out the College Huddle. We're both part of the same network here, the Big 12 Huddle. You just streamed here tonight. You're listening to this the day afterwards, of course, on Thursday. But I was just on the Cocaine Willie podcast here. Came out, of course, on Wednesday, September 25th. And so where else can everyone else find you guys here as we sign off?
Yeah, follow us individually. I'm at Bob Trollsby. Chef is at Chef Andre Napier, and Fireball Matt is at Matt Marchesini. And you can follow the pod at Cocaine Willie on YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, and Spotify and Apple Podcast.
Yeah, and if you're really curious, you can see the most hyped intro, I think, of the whole College Huddle network. So your podcast is getting some credit, Bob. I will give you guys a bunch of credit on that one. I think the intro, for mine, is short and sweet, but you guys got the most vibes to it for sure. If you're not already, follow at the CGA Tour on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, and wherever else you listen to podcasts, if there is another place else. And make sure you're saying go Pokes this weekend. Thanks so much for listening, everyone. We'll catch you guys in the next